Denise Lodde has joined us. Great report, Denise. This has got to be quite an experience for you to go in and just spend time with Rowney and also with these women, huh?
Well, I've heard about Rowney before, and I've always been curious about what the Philip Azzi Center does. But when I went and saw, and I spent time with these wonderful women who were there, that's when HIV became very real to me. Just what it's like to live with this virus. You know, yes, there are the physical side effects of these drugs are, you know, pretty bad. They were, you know, shedding some light on that. But it's really the social side effects of this virus that is the most damaging, and especially when you're a newcomer to this country, which so many people who have HIV in Canada are newcomers. You know, you compound that with already maybe some of the isolation they feel, and this is debilitating.
Mm-hmm. The stigma that we hear about that you encountered, that moved you a decade ago, is so real here. That's a surprise to me.
And sadly, the church hasn't really gone into that place, Jim. I'm sure you can, you know, when you started Vision Led 10 years ago, there weren't many churches doing, or ministries focused on bringing Jesus to this place of suffering, this place of pain. I mean, it really is the modern day leprosy of our time because, you know, you look at other illnesses like cancer, they don't have that stigma attached. You don't hear someone say, so I wonder how she got cancer. I wonder what she did to get cancer. And you know, and when you look at this disease, a lot of, you know, these women are so afraid of being found out. How did they get HIV? You know, and when you hear the stories of how they got HIV, it's just heartbreaking.
Yeah, well, it's interesting that there's a kind of a demographic shift as it relates to HIV and AIDS here in North America. It was seen as a gay man's disease for a couple decades, but now increasingly it's immigrants and mainly immigrant women.
Women and children.
And children coming in from other parts of the world. And of course, out there in the big world, it's not seen as a gay man's disease at all. It's seen as just a mankind disease. And it's 2/3, in fact, of those infected with HIV and AIDS every day are young women and girls, you know, between the ages of 15 and 40. And so there's a huge subset in this issue as it relates to the status of women and the very high view that Jesus had of women and the responsibility of the church to minister to women, especially if they're widows.
The ARVs, though, are such a great hope.
ARVs, antiretrovirals, medication.
Yes,
yeah.
I mean, I believe, what a great name for this man. And I've seen, I'm sure we all have, people on their deathbeds practically resurrected by this drug that gives them an extension of life and health restored.
But I mean, the drugs are one component, but without the social aspect, the community aspect, people really are still dying on the inside. And so that's where, you know, what Rowney was saying, I mean, there are ways that we can all do something. You know, around this table, I doubt we're going to find the cure for AIDS, but we can each in our own way make contributions so that people who are living with the virus have community, can just be themselves, can just, you know, share.
Yeah, you know, and Kathy and I were recently with a group of people living with HIV and AIDS in Malawi. And we spent a couple hours with them, about 30, 35 of them, men, women, and children, and all loving the Lord and being a real support to one another. And fortunately, because of the good work that's being done in that area, no more stigma. You know, the church has embraced them. The pastors are ministering to them. The community,
they have a sense of community.
They have a sense of community, and that social alienation, as these women express it so eloquently, is really one of the greatest elements of this HIV/AIDS pandemic. And you brought some stats.
Well, I just want to give you the update because actually there is some good news on the HIV/AIDS front. Worldwide, let's go to the worldwide statistics page. It's actually dropped from last year. 33.4 million people worldwide living with HIV and AIDS in 2008. So that's actually less than last year. I think 800,000 less. 2 million AIDS deaths in 2008. I mean, that has a lot to do with the antiretroviral medications. And more than 70% of those deaths are in sub-Saharan Africa. And this I thought was interesting, that out of the 33.4 million people worldwide living with HIV, only 4 million people are on these antiretroviral medications. So that is a challenge for sure, to try and bring, you know, some equality around the world, especially when so many of these infections are in Africa.
It's interesting. One of the clinicians that we work with in South Africa first brought this to my attention. She says, you know, Jim, we're calling ARVs the Lazarus drug, you know, because it brings people from death to life. Now, it does not cure HIV, but what it does, it keeps the virus in check so that a person can live indefinitely. At this point, it is indefinitely with ARVs, but there also has to be really good nutrition. And it's a kind of a perfect storm in Africa, you know, with people who are living on less than $2 a day. First of all, if they're able to get them, and, you know, and nobody can afford them, but if their government gives them to them free, that's great. Then they have to make sure they take the same course every day at the same time every day, and then they need good nutrition, and that's where there's a real breakdown, because nutrition often is just not available.
And even in Africa, we discovered people who were reluctant to go for the ARVs because that's a coming out.
Oh,
you have to come out to say, I have the problem.
Well, and Lena and Believe are a great example of two people who, you know, when Lena was diagnosed 6 years ago, she immediately got connected to HIV/AIDS groups in her community in Zimbabwe. That's actually where she met her husband, Believe. And so he had been living with the virus for 12 years. And so they're both on ARVs. And like he said, they've both had very rough experiences where they've been on the brink of death. But ARVs have saved their lives.
Now, we've got some Canadian stats too,
yes,
right, Denise?
That's right.
Let's take a
yeah,
look
it's
at
a
those.
little bit of a different picture here. 48,000 to 68,000 people living with HIV and AIDS in Canada. That was at the end of the 2005. That's the most recent stats we have. 25% of HIV cases attributed to women, and that's a rise. And I think we can predict that number is going to continue to rise as the years go. And 45% of these women are Aboriginal. That's unfortunately a piece I could not bring into my story, is how this is impacting the Aboriginal community. But I would like to explore that in the future.
You know, we need to explore this. This is a huge issue, and sort of the critical mass of much of that is on the West Coast, in the Vancouver area. It's intravenous drug-related, you know, which is a huge issue. But we certainly have a responsibility to our Aboriginal women. You know, we have to be engaged there. Great report, Denise.
Thank you.
Thanks for coming our way.
Stay on it, Denise.
Yeah.
We'll look forward
let's
to
get a report on the Aboriginal and the
Absolutely,
struggles that they're facing.